So hello and welcome to another teaching lesson under the series A Long Walk, Walking with the Children of Israel, part 9. So this is technically still under the idolization versus adoration part, but as you've noticed, God has been giving us very short lessons under these areas, and I love it because it's like he's causing us to hone in on specific things, but under this lesson, he's showing us how no matter how much idolatry, no matter how much, no matter how much idolatry was done in this area, no matter how much the children of Israel show idolatry, he continued to show them love. So he continued to adore them even as they were betraying him. And he is the ultimate example of this. Does that mean that he didn't get tired? That's not what it meant. Because he called them stiff-necked. He said he wasn't going to go with them because if he would go with them, he was going to destroy them even before they got there. Like it was going to be all of that. So I didn't say that he was not at his max with them. I didn't say that he was pleased with what they were doing. I didn't say he even accepted what they did. I'm not saying that, that's something that we should try. Right? We shouldn't try. We shouldn't test his patience. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, even though the children of Israel, on every occasion possible, went into idolatry, even after he told them, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Let me show you 10 examples, 12 examples. Let me show you so many ways, that I'm going to be there for you. Let me part the Red Sea for you. Let me cause your enemies to give into your bosom. The Egyptians gave all of what they had. Let me kill the firstborn. Let me do this. Let me send plagues. Let me do all this in your sight. Let me cause manna to come down. Let me do all of this. And all I'm telling you is to let me be your God. That's all I'm saying. Let me be your God. Don't go to nothing or no one else and give it my glory. Right? And I will adore you. I will take care of you. I will cause manna to come. I will cause manna and quail to come down to you. All you got to do is go pick it up. And on the Sabbath day, on the day before the Sabbath, get double because we don't do that on the seventh day, right? I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry about it. Not one day did they miss manna. Did it not, and that's equivalent to us because not one day have we gotten up and there was no sun or moon in the sky. Not one day have we gotten up and there was no bird chirping somewhere. And not one day have we gotten up and there was not a tree or a plant or a grass or something or some type of nature outside. Not one day have we gotten up. But all he said was, let me be your God. Don't idolize nothing or nobody. Let me be your God. And we still, just like the children of Israel, will go and find something else that we will allow to be our God or take our attention off of God. We're all guilty. There's not one. There's not one. And I know this because of this lesson, if nothing else, this lesson here. There's not one. When God tells us something or warns us of something, it's because he knows the distraction or the temptation will be there for us to do otherwise. So there's not one who has not been in danger of some level of idolatry, whether it is working too much, whether it is being selfish, it's all about me, whether it is because we need balance. We need God for it. We need God in order to not, commit idolatry. We need God. We need him. Because otherwise we will get too engulfed in something. And to be too engulfed in something and to be too heavily inundated with anything, whether it is children, ourselves, our families, our men, our money, whatever, too engulfed in anything else other than God, giving it God's place, giving it God's glory is idolatry. And we don't want to always hear that. We don't want to always hear that because we think just because we believe in God, that's not, God is, we believe in God, so that's enough. No, what is getting our attention? Like I said, I'm guilty too. What's getting our attention? And sometimes it can happen so suddenly and subtly. Did you hear what I said? Suddenly and subtly. Suddenly, but subtly. Where you just look up and it's like almost like, I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened. Next thing I know, I was just not paying attention. I was just not worshiping. It's been so and so, so and so since I prayed. I look up and all of a sudden it's been 2 weeks since I've talked to God, or it's been 2 months since I fasted. It's been this, it's been that. But I was on it before this thing came, or before God blessed me with this, or before I had this, or I had that. I was on it. And then all of a sudden, it was just 2 weeks before I did this. It was 2 months before I did that. It was 2 years since I've done this. And I looked up, and now all of a sudden there's this disconnect or this distance between God and I. Anybody. It can happen to anybody. This is why the Bible tells us, watch as well as pray, that we enter not into temptation. Watch as well as pray. Be harmless, be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. Because it can happen suddenly and subtly. And we look up and our connection is not as strong with the Lord. You know, if you think about electricity, it don't just go from strong electricity to blackout all the time. Sometimes it's something called a brownout. I remember one time having a brownout where the lights were dim. It wasn't totally out, but it wasn't totally on. And sometimes that's where we are in God. We're not totally out, but we're not totally on. It's a brownout. But see, what we don't understand in the brownout is, with a brownout, we've lost a lot of connection. With the brownout, we can't see as well as we would see if it was totally on. With a brownout, our connection ain't strong enough. And the Bible says, I am the vine, ye are the branches. Without me, you bear no good fruit. So what fruit? What fruit? See, without full connection, the things in my refrigerator will spoil quicker, right? Even though it still seems like it's on. See, we can be deceived because we're walking around with a portion of a connection. And because we have a portion of a connection, we think that we are connected. But none of us want a portion of a connection to our refrigerator. None of us want a portion of a connection to our freezer where all its meat is and all this stuff that we have spent, thousands of dollars nowadays. We don't want a portion of a connection. And so if we don't want a portion of connection to those things, we don't want a portion of a connection to God. No, we don't want a portion of connection to God. And so we have to be very, 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 very careful that we're not walking around dimmed, thinking, especially because if we're surrounded by people who have no connection, we can think we're okay. This is why we should not compare, because we can think we're okay because we have a portion of a connection and they have none. But the only person or only thing we should be comparing ourselves to is who we were when we first got saved, right? Who we were when we first got saved, who God wants us to be, who we have the ability to be, not those people around us. Because we'll find ourselves sometimes being the best of the worst. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about resting in God today. Resting in God today. Okay. And listen, this is a lesson. If it ain't for you, it's for me. Okay. If it ain't for you, it's for me. Okay. So, I get what you need here. You understand? Get what you need. Okay. Because this is really, going to be good for us to really delve in it. It'll bless you if you let it. So these are just a few scriptures. Again, take your notes, right? Take notes because these are just a few of the scriptures. So we're in Exodus 34 and 35. That's predominantly where we are in our walking with the children of Israel lesson. And then the rest of them are just kind of referenced and pulled in. So our main scripture is our main scriptures, Exodus 34 and 35, but then Genesis 2 and 3, Exodus 20, 10 through 11, Exodus 31, 15 through 17, Leviticus 23 and 3, Matthew 11, 28 through 30, Mark 2 and 27. These are just some of the scriptures that I will be referencing as we go through the lesson. Okay, again, there are definitely going to be others, and you may find some or know some in your daily life that you use in your quest to find rest with the Lord. Okay, so it's not all inclusive. It's just those that I'm going to be using. So let's talk about the definition of rest. So the world's definition of rest, just out of a regular, Merriam-Webster, out of the dictionary, is to cease work or movement in order to relax, refresh oneself, or recover strength. To cease work or movement in order to relax, refresh, and recover. Relax, refresh, and recover. Another definition of rest is to be placed or supported so as to stay in a specified position. So when you're at rest, you're not moving, you're just kind of placed in one position. A noun, the noun rest is an instance or period of relaxing or ceasing to engage in strenuous or stressful activity. So rest tells me I shouldn't be stressful or strenuous. Okay. And last but not least, when dealing with music, rest is an interval of silence of a specific duration. So if you're at a musical, or if you're at a symphony orchestra or something like that, when they have a period of rest, that's a period of silence where nobody's playing the instruments. Okay, so that's just what rest means, just the world's definition of rest. Okay, now let's take it to the Bible. What does it mean to rest biblically? Okay, so in addition to, the biblical definition of rest can sometimes mean the things that we've, read as far as what the world means, but it takes it a step further. Okay, so it doesn't dismiss what what the definition of rest is for the world. It actually takes that and it takes it a step further. So rest biblically means to be inwardly quiet, composed, and at peace with God, to possess and walk in the perfect peace that only God gives. Rest means to be free from guilt, worry, or the heaviness of sin by trusting in God and his promises. Okay. All right. Now we're getting deep, right? Rest also means a deep and tranquil state of being that allows us to connect with our higher purpose, find inner peace, and experience a sense of spiritual alignment. So the things that stick out to me here are inward quiet, composed, peace of God, free from guilt, free from worry, free from the heaviness of sin, trusting God, trusting his promises, and spiritual alignment and higher purpose. So let's talk about God's idea of rest. God's idea of rest, okay? So there's a physical aspect of God's idea of rest, and then there's a spiritual aspect of God's idea of rest, okay? The physical aspect when it comes to God's idea of rest is referenced in Genesis 2 and 3. So when we go over to Genesis 2 and 3, he told us, it says, and God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation. So if God needed to rest, the $1 million question here is, why don't we think we do? I'm amazed at the hustle culture that I once was a part of. I once was a part of the hustle culture that said hustle, 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 hustle. And then they said that you will sleep when you die. So hustle, 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 hustle. Well, here's the thing that they didn't tell you is that hustle, 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 and you're going to die quick. You're going to die much faster than you would have. Because what I found is I used to be a workaholic. Okay, I used to be a workaholic. I used to try to get everything done. Let me get it done right now. Da 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 da. And I used to say it's not enough hours in the day. But then I had to understand how I was insulting God, because how dare I say that it's not enough hours in the day when God made each day perfectly 24 hours. I have not had a 25-hour day yet. Have you? I've not had a 23-hour day yet. Have you? No, every day is 24 hours perfectly, which means that if I feel that it's too much on my plate, then I need to sit back and say, God, what did I put there, or what shouldn't be there anymore? Because some of us, especially those of us who feel like it's not enough hours in a day, if we're honest with ourselves, the truth of the matter is we've allowed things to be piled on our plate, but we haven't done a good job of stopping to evaluate what's on our plate that needs to come off. Because surely we shouldn't be putting something on the plate if we're not taking something off the plate. And so I will talk about me. I did not do a good job of taking something off the plate, but I kept piling things on the plate. I kept piling things on the plate. I kept letting other people pile things on my plate for me to do because I was good at it. So they would say, oh, you're good at this. So can you help me with this? Oh, you're good at this. Can you help me with that? And people started putting things on me because I was good at it. But let me tell you something, good does not always equal God. And that was something I had to learn. And that set me free. That was the beginning of my process of setting me free from feeling like I had to do everything for everybody when they asked me to. Good didn't always mean God. And so I had to stop and say, wait a minute, just because it's a good thing don't mean it's a God thing. And that don't mean I'm supposed to do that thing. Because the Bible says all things lawful are not expedient. That means just because you can don't mean you should, baby. Just because you can don't mean you should. And so I had to learn quickly. No, 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 no. I ain't doing that. Uh-uh. Uh-uh. No, 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 no. Uh-uh. I had to learn. If God did all of his work, and his work is way greater than mine, his work has lasted a long time. If he created everything in 6 days and rested on the 7th day, why do I think my job, which is heavily fueled by technology and things that do stuff for me, right? God didn't have no technology to fling the stars in the sky, right? He didn't have a machine that he could just hit a button and do nothing. So if he did all his stuff himself, but he still rested, why do I think that I don't need to rest? Because hustle culture told me I didn't. But no. There comes a time when you learn better, you do better when you know better. Okay, so there's a physical rest aspect in God. And even though God is not the God that deals with emotional stuff, even in that physical rest, he gives us emotional rest as well, because he said, let not your heart be troubled. He said, don't worry. Don't worry. Remember, our original definition said free from guilt, free from worry. So guess what? Emotional rest comes with that physical rest, because he tells us, let not your heart be troubled. Don't worry, don't fear. So when it comes to emotions, God pretty much tells us don't. Like, don't, right? He don't tell us be happy. He don't tell us to be happy. He said, I come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. He didn't say, I want you to be happy. That's not what he said. He didn't say that. He don't address, God don't deal with emotions. That's why, because the emotions are fickle. God is not fickle. Today you will feel sad, tomorrow you will feel happy. Today you will feel this, tomorrow you'll feel that. That's why God don't deal in feelings, because he's like, I don't have no, look, we moving this way. We moving this way, and we're gonna be consistent in this thing, and we doing this, right? So we're not doing all that extra stuff, all that all over the place stuff. God, like, I don't deal with that. I deal with the things that are stable, that are consistent. I deal with the things that are not in the midst of confusion, and your feelings will have you confused. And so the physical rest aspect really helps us emotionally and mentally as well, because basically he'll tell us, don't fear, don't worry, don't. So God's idea of rest physically is for us to also mentally and emotionally rest too. Why? Because we're resting in what he told us to do. We're resting because often he tells us, I'll give you rest. I'll give it to you. See, the thing about rest and wisdom and things like that, he says, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. Just come. Just ask. I'll give it to you. So we don't have to labor for it. We don't have to toil for it. We don't have to do none of that for it. All we have to do is come to him. All we have to do is come to him. Come unto me, all ye that are burdened, heavy laden, and I'll do what? Give you rest. That's Matthew, I think 11:27. Come to me. I'll give it to you. But we will, oh no, hustle culture said, I got to work. Okay. And then you work. And then you do all of that for what? Because when we get all this money and we got all these minions around us doing what we want them to do, as we can see from the lives of those that are in Hollywood and the bright lights and all of that, it still does not equate to peace. It still does not equate to abundant life. We got it twisted. We think abundant life is money related, but no, abundant life is bathed in things that money cannot buy. And we see the price that those people pay. I'm not saying that it's wrong to be famous. Nope, not saying that. But what I'm saying is it does not equal hustle culture, working, sleeping when you die. That does not equate to an abundant life and a life of peace and the things that God has promised us. It doesn't. It does not. And so we have to be very careful what we buy into, whether we buy into it with our mouth or not. We have to be very careful with that. Okay. All right. So God has a physical rest aspect, the one in which, like, he blessed the 7th day. Some people say, well, why is it the 7th day? Because I remember my grandmother, when we were kids, went and asked the pastor. She said, isn't the Sabbath day on Saturday? And one of the ladies at the church said, you know better than that. The Sabbath day is Sunday. That's why we worship. The pastor had a stuttering problem, so he couldn't interject, right? He couldn't interject. He was stuttering. And so when he finally was able to get the words out, he said, Miss Knighton, you're right. He said, you're right. The Sabbath day is a Saturday. You could have picked that lady's face up off the floor because she just knew she was right. She just knew it was Sunday. But the truth was Saturday was a Sabbath day. And that's the day, that's the seventh day. That's the day that God said, I'm going to call this day holy. Now, there are several people who still observe this day. They observe the Sabbath, which is Saturday. They observe that day as the day of rest. Because Sabbath is, I think, Greek or Hebrew for to rest. Okay, so they observe that day. They observe the Sabbath as Saturday, just like God intended. Then there are some people who observe Sunday as the Sabbath day because once Jesus came, they felt like, well, Jesus came, he didn't come to do away with the law, but it changed because Jesus healed on the Sabbath. And when they asked him, why would you heal on the Sabbath? He said, I'm the Lord. I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. Like, I can do this. And here's the thing. He's like, but did not do good on the Sabbath. The whole point of it was not to do away with it, but somebody needed to be healed. And God never wants us to turn our back on somebody because, no, it's the Sabbath. You know what I mean? And that's basically what he was saying. He wasn't saying I'm coming to do away with this. He's saying, but I did a good thing. This was something that needed to be done. This is not something that I felt like doing. This was not pleasure. This was something that needed to be done. And so therefore I did this thing to help this person, to bless this person. But even still, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath, right? And so there's a physical aspect, but then there's a spiritual aspect called rest, resting in God. And that's the one that oftentimes we struggle with because we rest in God no matter what we see. It requires a level of faith. And even though it only requires the faith of a mustard seed, that mustard seed faith seems like it's huge when everything that you see does not match up with everything that God has said. And so therefore now you need faith in order to enter into that spiritual rest and say, God, I know that in the end I'm going to win. Because you're looking over here and you're looking over there and you're looking over here and you're looking at the situation. And if you look at the situation, it seems like either it got worse or it didn't change. And you're looking over here at them and this will happen to them and this will happen to them. So why am I any different? And then you're thinking about your past and you're thinking about the things you've done. And God, why would God rescue me? Why would God bless me? My righteousness is but filthy rags. And so therefore, it's hard to enter into spiritual rest when you have not entered into the peace that God has given, when you have not accepted the forgiveness that God has given. Like there are so many prerequisites that come with the spiritual rest. And that's the reason why many people cannot access it, because we're still guilty of the things that we've done against God. We still haven't accepted his forgiveness. We still haven't extended forgiveness to others. So we know his forgiveness to us is conditioned upon that. And so therefore, spiritual rest is hard to access when you're carrying the burdens of all these other things. But God still said, come unto me. 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 I'll give you rest. But many of us won't go because we don't feel like we're good enough for God. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to be in his, because church people have made us feel like we're not good enough, because the enemy speaks to us and tells us we're not good enough, because we have our own issues and we feel like we're not good enough. And so therefore we won't go to God, which is where the presence is. And where the presence is, that's where the peace of God is. That's where the rest of God is. So that's why the enemy will tell you you're not good enough. This is not about going to church. I'm not telling you church is wrong. This is about the presence of God, the peace of God, the rest of God. Okay? And so there are two different types of rest that God has an idea of for us. Physical rest, meaning when we rest our bodies, rest our minds, rest our souls. And then there's a spiritual rest in which we take him at his word. We believe what he says no matter what we see. Okay? So let's talk about the lack of rest, lack of physical rest. What happens when we have a lack of physical rest? And this also, applies, some of this applies to a lack of spiritual rest as well. So look at all of these things, right? Chronic health problems. So this is the physical aspect of things, right? Heart disease, kidney disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, obesity, depression, anxiety, stress, increased inflammation in the body, decreased immune system function. So immunal dysfunction. These are physical things that happen to us because we don't get enough rest. And we learned how much we were not getting rest when the pandemic hit. When the pandemic hit, we found out just how tired we were, right? Because some people slept for days. They had no obligation. You ain't got to go to work. You ain't got to go nowhere. Some people slept for days. Not, I'm not talking about the people that was depressed. I'm not talking about the people that were, going through things. I'm talking about people who were just tired, who just got a chance to just rest. And I often say this, and this may be very controversial, and in no way am I minimizing anything that happened, but the pandemic saved a lot of lives too. Because there are a lot of people who were struggling because they didn't get rest. And it gave us 2 months to literally rest. So there were people that were on the brink of heart attacks. There were people on the brink of all types of strokes and issues and different things that because they took those 2 months to literally rest, their bodies were, remember the definition before? Their bodies were what? Relaxed, refreshed, and recovered. Remember our definition of rest? One of the definitions was to cease work or movement in order to relax, refresh oneself, or recover. Well, guess what? The pandemic allows some people to relax, be refreshed, and recover. Yeah. Then a lack of rest comes with cognitive disorders. And remember, everything starts in the mind. And if everything starts in the mind, when we don't have rest and we have memory loss and brain fog and attention deficit disorder and reaction dysfunctions and impairments and incorrect decisions, increased irritability, when we have all those things going on, everything starts in the mind. If your mind is distorted, if your mind is tired, if you're irritable, if you can't make a good decision, if you don't react well, your reaction goes from 5 seconds to 20 seconds, right? That's the difference between life and death sometimes. When your attention is off, you're not paying attention, you miss different things, you got brain fog, you can't remember stuff. Guess what? That all impacts the way that you move and operate. And don't let you be over another life. You over a child, you over things at work. All of a sudden now your reaction time is off and all these different things are off. You're irritated. All of this is going on. Why? Because you won't go to bed, because you won't take some time to rest, because you have subscribed to the hustle culture. Then there's social issues. So you got health problems. Then you have cognitive disorders when you don't get rest. Then there's social issues because it starts to interfere with your work, school, driving. Your reaction time when you're driving can be the difference between life and death. Your social functioning overall. You don't feel like going nowhere because you're tired. You beat down. So you got all this money that you didn't work for. Hustle culture done told you to work for all this money, but you're too tired to spend a dime. You too depressed to go anywhere. It interferes with everything. You can't make good decisions at work. You're failing your tests at school. Your reaction time is off with driving. Your attention deficit with driving. All of these things because of the lack of rest. So could it be that God knew? Could it be? He knows everything. So could it be? And this is a rhetorical question, trust me. But could it be that he knew? Let me give my children. I told you earlier that he warns us because he already knows the temptation is there. He said, listen, don't forget to rest. He's telling us don't forget to rest. Why? Because the temptation is going to be there for you not to do so. For me not to do so. For us not to do so. This is what lack of rest gets us. And of course, this is not an all-inclusive list because spiritually, if we really just had a spiritual category, this is just physical, which impacts the spiritual. But the spiritual category is we have brain fog too. We have memory loss too. We have a spiritual heart disease too. We can have spiritual depression, spiritual anxiety too. God said, be anxious for nothing but pray. Spiritual inflammation too. Spiritual memory loss. So now we done forgot what all God has done for us. Brain fog, attention deficit disorder. We don't hear God. So all of this doubles as spiritual as well. Social issues. When we have social issues, now all of a sudden we're not a good witness. Because when you go out and you irritated and you going off on people and popping off on people, they don't see God. They don't see the kingdom. Not the kingdom of God. They see the other kingdom. Kingdom of darkness. You're popping off, your face frowned up and toe up, and you're irritated and you're pissed off and you're all this and you're all that, and you're going off and you can't wait and you wish somebody would and all of that type of stuff. Why? Because you ain't go to bed, because you ain't took time to rest. Whose fault is that? But many of us are dealing with these issues, whether it's physical rest or spiritual rest, whether these are impacting us physically or spiritually, we're dealing with them every day. Because we have taken part in a culture. We have bought into a culture that tells us to work, get money. When God told us that there was going to be a time when we had to choose who was going to be our God. Was it going to be money, God, or mammon? Mammon is money. At one point, we're going to have to choose. Is it going to be God or is it going to be money? Because we were at some point going to hate one and love the other. And we can see God has given us ample examples of those who have decided that mammon was their God. And we see the destruction that has come with that. Okay, we see the destruction that's come with that. So I want to give a few major points. Number one, restoration starts with rest, literally and figuratively. It starts with R-E-S-T, literally. But figuratively, we can expect to be restored if we do not enter into God's rest. Even on a physical level, we can't be restored until we enter into some type of rest. Many people are looking for restoration, but we won't enter into God's rest. So it's not coming. It's not coming. We have to enter into God's rest. Restoration starts with rest. God commanded us to rest for purposes of preservation. If you think about, I think it was Elijah. Elijah was afraid of Jezebel. We did a series on Jezebel. If you haven't checked it out, you can check it out on our Sunday School Remix YouTube channel. Elijah was scared of Jezebel, but Jezebel said she was going to kill him. And he ran because she had done killed everybody else. Now, he a man of God. You just watch God send fire from heaven. So much fire that it dried everything up. You watched everybody that Jezebel had in her camp for hours chant, stab themselves, make all kind of noises. They did everything under the sun. If you don't believe me, go to, I think it's 1 Kings 9. They did everything under the sun because it was a challenge. The challenge was the contest on Mount Carmel, 1 Kings 18. They had a challenge. They said, whoever God come down with the fire, that's the God. That's the real God. And so they had 450 prophets. Baal had 450 prophets over in 1 Kings 18 and 21. It says, then Elijah stood in front of them and said, how much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. But the people were completely silent. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only prophet of the Lord who is left. Like, he really believed that. But anyway. But Baal has 450 prophets. Now bring 2 bulls. The prophets of Baal may choose whichever one they wish and cut it into pieces and lay it on the wood of their altar. But without setting fire to it, I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood on the altar, but not set fire to it. Then call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the true God, and all the people agree. Them Baal prophets got the doing everything under the sun. Not a lick of fire came. Not a lick of fire. And if you go down to the verse 27 of the 18th chapter, it says, about noontime, Elijah began mocking them, saying, y'all should have shouted louder. For surely he is God. Perhaps he is daydreaming or is relieving himself. Or maybe he's away on a trip or he's asleep and needs to be awakened. So they start shouting louder and followed their normal culture. They cut themselves with knives and swords until the blood gushed out. They did all of this. They raved all afternoon until the time of the evening sacrifice, but there was still no sound, no reply, no response. None. Elijah called out, and whoosh, fire came. If you go down to verse 38, it says, immediately the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even burnt the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, the Lord, he is God. Yes, the Lord is God. So all of that, Elijah saw all of that happen. And as soon as Jezebel said, I'm going to kill him, because he think he gonna outdo me, I'm killing him, Elijah was scared. And what did he do? He fled. He fled. He fled for his life in chapter 19. He fled. Ahab couldn't wait to get home and tell Jezebel, because that's the type of man he was. Ahab got home. He told Jezebel, this is chapter 19, told Jezebel everything that Elijah had done, including the way he had killed the prophets of Baal, because he killed them prophets, okay? So Jezebel sent a message to Elijah and said, may the God strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I ain't killed you for killing them, or just as you killed them. And Elijah did what? He was afraid and fled for his life. But here's how good God is. Even though Elijah fled, what happened? It says, then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. God still had a plan. God still made provision. God still said, I need to preserve him. He did all his running, all his fighting. I need to preserve him. He told him, get up and eat. He looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. Where'd that come from? He done ran into the wilderness. He done ran into, it said Mount Sinai. He done ran into the mountains. He done ran. It didn't say Mount Sinai, it said Sinai. But he done ran up and he ran somewhere. He wasn't over there and then came out and then went back. This is somewhere he just ran to. But guess what? He ate and drank and laid down again. Why? He was tired. And then the angel of the Lord came again, touched him and said, get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. God commanded us to rest for purposes of preservation. He says, I know where I'm taking you. I know what you need. I know there's a season of rest you got to have. Typically, when we have a season of rest, it is followed by the next level. It is followed by the next thing that God wants us to do. So it is imperative that we do not miss the season of rest in the midst of worry. It is imperative that we do not miss the season of rest because we're focused on the wrong stuff. It is imperative that we do not miss the season of rest because it is preparing us for the thing that God has us to do next. Rest, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. Get up and eat and rest. He let him rest, and he told him, get up and eat. Nourishment, provision, rest. Okay, now let's go. And what happened next? It says, so he got up and ate and drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. I'm sorry, he ran into the wilderness and he was getting ready to go to Mount Sinai. Yeah. So he rested, and God made provision for him to eat. Why? Because he was getting ready to have to travel for 40 days and 40 nights to go to Mount Sinai. God knew where he was going to send him and what he was going to do. God knew that. God knew he was going to go on a 40-day trip. So let me let you rest and let me give you something to eat. Let me let you rest and give you something to eat. So when God is telling us, physically, hey, start working out. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. Why? Because I'm getting ready to send you. I'm getting ready to take you. I'm getting ready to send you. I'm getting ready to take you. So, hey, I need you to start doing this for purposes of preservation. But we so hooked into hustle culture. We're so hooked into the world, we didn't hear him. Why? Because we got a brownout. You see how all this goes together? Okay. Jesus did not come to do away with the law. We tend to think, oh, we don't got to do the Sabbath day no more because Jesus came. Jesus didn't come to do away with the law. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. So understand, Jesus didn't come to do away with the Sabbath. We still should have a Sabbath. Now, whatever day you want to make it, if you feel like Jesus came and we don't have to make it on a Saturday, that's between you and the Lord. Because some people say, well, the Sabbath is no longer on Saturday. It's any day that you, okay, do what you do. Okay, do what works for you. Do what you want to be accountable for, because you're going to have to stand and answer for that, not me. But Jesus didn't come to do away with the law. He came to fulfill it. And so if he fulfilled it and you feel like his fulfillment of the law allows you to have any day to rest, fine, if that's what you believe. But for those who believe that the Sabbath is still Saturday, fine. But what I'm trying to say with this point is we still need to have it. We still need a day of rest. We still need a day where we just shut down. We still need a day where we enjoy. We still need a day where we reconnect. We still need a day where we relax. We still need a day where we recover. We still need it. Even more now than ever, because before you put your feet on the floor, your mind is going. We on our phones. We swiping and we doing everything. We don't even take time to rest. So we need it more than ever. We don't take time to rest our minds. We looking at light from the time we go to bed to the time we wake up. We looking at everything online. We got TVs now. We got computers now. We got iPads now. We got, so we're looking at light all day. Sometimes we just need to shut down. Now more than ever. Technology has made things so much faster, but not understanding that it comes with a cost. It comes with a cost. Okay? Spiritual rest is an act of God's mercy for us. Why? He said, look here. If I needed a day of rest, I know they're going to need one. It's an act of mercy. Think about the children of Israel when they were, in bondage. And they were working. I mean, it was tearing them down. They were strong. It said they were strong. Their physical dexterity was strong, but they was beat down. And so God's mercy for us says, hey, you need a day of rest. Hey, I want to preserve you. When you love something, when you got a favorite shirt, you make sure that shirt don't get nothing on it. You take care of it, right? Because you want to preserve that shirt. You want to preserve those pants. Those are my favorite pants. That's my favorite coat. You do everything you can to preserve that thing, right? And so God says, I love you and I want you to be in the earth and I want you to do the things in the earth for me. But in addition to that, I want you to also enjoy. I want you to also be susceptible to abundant life and living. And so I want to preserve you. Just like you preserving your favorite shirt, just like you preserving your pants, I want to preserve you. And so spiritual rest is really, physical rest even, is an act of God's mercy for us. We have to learn to see it that way. Okay. Rest can be found in the presence of God. If you look at Exodus 33 and 14, if you look at 11, 28 through 29, 28, 29, and 30, he says, come unto me, I'll give you rest. But in both of those scriptures, he said, come here in my presence. Either it's come here or in my presence, you'll find rest. But again, like I said earlier, oftentimes we've allowed something to tell us that we're not worthy. And we ain't never gonna be worthy. It ain't our righteousness that makes us be able to get this from God. It's his compassion for us. It's his love for us. So even the most righteous person, it says their righteousness is but filthy rags too. So it's no qualifier for this, right? It's no qualification. Meaning it's nothing that we can do to work ourselves into this. It's nothing that we can do to give ourselves into this. No, he says, I'll give it to you because I love you. I want to preserve you. not just for my use, but for you to enjoy too. And so rest can be found in the presence of God, and the peace of God is there too. When we run into the presence of God, we run into that peace. This is why worship is so important. Because when we worship, that is when the peace of God comes. That's where the rest can be found. This is why a lot of times people worship and go to sleep. Okay? And last but not least, unrest leads to confusion, chaos, and an incorrect posture of heart, which means that because we don't have the rest that we need, because we don't take the time to reconnect, to recover, to relax, to revive, to refresh, to renew, when we don't do that, I'm reminded of one day I was talking to my former doctor. And he said that when we rest, our body is going to do one thing. So whatever that one thing is up to what we do before we go to bed. So I'm talking about physical rest here. He said to me, he said, if you eat right before bed, so you eat a steak and potatoes or you eat something heavy right before bed, your body now is going to take all night to try to digest that heavy meal, which means you're going to wake up tired because your body didn't take the time to revive, relax, renew, recover. But if you give your body an empty belly, then your body says, oh, we don't have nothing to do on that end. So we can take the time to revive, renew, refresh. If you don't believe this, stay woke for 24, 48 hours, 72 hours, if you can. And watch, all of a sudden, you'll get a sore throat. You start to get a cold. You start to get stuff, sinuses, all type of stuff. And you're like, what is going on? Because you're not getting enough rest. You get 1 hour, 2 hours of sleep at night. After about night number 2 or 3, all of a sudden you're like, your body start coming down. Well, you're like, I got a cold, or I got this going on. I got that going on. Why? Because you didn't get a chance to recover. Your body didn't get a chance to recover from going. It's the same thing spiritually. If we don't recover and reconnect and allow God to restore us, then all of a sudden we'll have an incorrect posture of heart that doesn't allow us to remember that God is the source. We'll start thinking God is our resource. We'll start playing God like he's the resource and not the source. We'll start playing God like, oh, prayer is the last resort instead of the first option. Why? Because now we're running after money. We're running after jobs. We're running after this. We're running after that. And we never stop to say, wait a minute. Let me thank God, who is the source for my resources. So that's where the incorrect posture of heart comes. We don't have enough rest. Remember, we have spiritual brain fog and we have spiritual memory loss. And so what ends up happening is now we have forgotten where our help comes from. We have forgotten who will do what we need done for us. And so we enter into worry. We enter into distress. We enter into anxiety. Why? Because we didn't get enough rest. We didn't spiritually rest. We didn't physically rest. And so as a result, now we have a confusion, a chaos, and God is not the author of confusion. And so now we got all this stuff going on and we're saying, God, I don't know. And after a while, we stop even praying because we feel like I got to fix this. Incorrect posture of heart will tell us that, oh, I can't go to church, or I can't worship. I don't have time for that because I got to go to work, or because I got to do this, I got to do that. Listen here, you could worship in your car. You ain't got to worship. You could worship in your car. You can, we can worship in the shower. We can make time for God. On our busiest day, quote unquote, there is time for God. And if not, look at your plate. Remember, I told you, it's something on your plate that ain't got no business being there if you ain't got time for God. That's just the truth. For me, for you, for everybody. If you don't have time to worship, to praise, to pray, and I'm not talking about all at one time, and I'm not talking about it got to be at 11 o'clock or got to be this, got to be. If you don't have time for God, then something is on your plate that should not be there. I can tell you that with the greatest certainty in the world. It is something on your plate that should not be there. Because God is never going to give us so much that we don't honor him. Never. And when something becomes a distraction, I'm a witness to tell you, he will take that away. Because he ain't finna give you nothing that you going to have in his place or love more than him. Not so. So unrest leads to confusion, chaos, and an incorrect posture of heart. And remember, I told you, spiritual heart disease. And when we enter into an incorrect posture of heart, we are in trouble. We are in danger. We are in danger. Okay. So that's it. Let me stop for questions. This was good to me. I hope it was good to you.